Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gents. This is DafubFilm&TV, and admittedly at this point, rather belatedly, because the last episode, season 6 of the season, has been released already, I am getting to watching episode 5, and here is my review of it. Again, real world circumstances got in the way, so this is why it's coming to you late. I apologize. The spoiler warnings ahead, just so everyone knows. There has been a trope that first when it came to my attention in Disney's content a good few years ago now, with the first of the sequel trilogy of Star Wars movies, of established male characters returning for one last hurrah, and it turning out that they're all in old age sad old grey losers. This is when this first happened with with The Force Awakens, specifically with Han Solo, who was also promptly very quickly killed off, and you saw the beginnings of that in with Luke Skywalker at the end of that movie as well, and it was absolutely nothing but that for the most part in The Last Jedi, its sequel. In Last Jedi was absolutely infuriating, but one could argue that back then that was a quote unquote a one-off, and that it wasn't something of a trend slash stereotype that for some reason Disney slash Lucasfilm, and now also Marvel, would thoroughly embrace for some unknown reason. But in the time since, it's just happened, over and over and over again. The criticisms of season 1 of Loki was that Loki was something of a sad, wet blanket compared to what he was in the comics. Again, I haven't seen the comics, so I can't comment on that. And maybe that's, one of the reasons I like season 1 of Loki as well as I did was probably because those creative choices did not enrage slash infuriate me the way they appear to have done the comic fans of the Loki character in Marvel. But a lot of people did not like that first season of Loki for that reason, specifically, and their kind of base creative choices in relation to other characters like what is her female Loki? I can't remember that character's name in the show again. Even after I've watched most of season 2, I still can't remember her name. My apologies. But it's also something that's appeared elsewhere. I thought kind of they did the kind of tired old sad dude thing again, trope. In Hawkeye, there are probably, what other shows have they done it in? They're probably in a number of other things from both Star Wars and from Marvel, or just Disney in general. I haven't seen the most recent Indiana Jones movie, but that apparently, with Indy himself, follows that route of the character as well. And it's now happened with enough regularity, that it can't be by accident. They appear to be kind of insisting on making the male characters in their shows very there's whenever they return to them, or they to existing established characters. Again, Indiana Jones, old sad. Han Solo, old sad. Luke Skywalker, old sad. Hawkeye, in his own show named after him, kind of middle-aged and sad. And I'm sure there are many others that I can't remember off the top of my head that have appeared since The Force Awakens, but it's really become a trope. And okay, once or twice, that's trying to do go in a different direction story wise. Okay, although I'm sure the established fans for a character you're making old and sad will be less than happy. It may not be a good financial business sense to make those creative choices, but you do you. But it's now when it happens over and over and over again, if nothing else, it becomes boring and completely unsurprising and unexpected. or completely not unexpected, completely unsurprising and unsurprising at all, boring. You think they'd try something different, like have one of their new or old male characters come back and him be happy or successful or just where he left off the last time, and very, very what's the word for it? Well, in an incarnation that the OG fans of the character would like. Now, where this comes in, again, spoiler warnings with this episode of Loki, is that in essence, the temporal loom thingy has basically kind of blown up or fallen apart or whatever it is in the previous episode. And Loki finds himself back in the TVA. Everyone else is gone. We later find out that everyone else has been kind of rebooted back to their original places in their own original parts of the timeline and their own unique branches of the timeline. And what do we find? We find Mobius is who's been, kind of obsessed, at least for, I think both season 1 and season 2, at least kind of in the back of his head, with jet skis. And we find out, why is that? Oh yeah, it's because he's a jet ski salesman in his kind of original place in the timeline. And equally importantly, he's also basically a single father whose wife appears to have run off at some point in the past. Now you can say, you've been running through that plot thread for 2 seasons, and this is your explanation as to why he's got something of a kind of an obsession or interest in jet skis. Maybe he was kind of interested about using them. But, just, if it was okay, fine. The problem is that when you then go on to the other characters who've been kind of reset, we have Casey, who is for some reason imprisoned in Alcatraz. One assumes because he committed some sort of serious criminal offense, which in isolation you could say, considering how the character is portrayed and written, is kind of hilarious. If he's actually, the original him is actually a hardened violent criminal. But when you then take into account that OB, whose full name I shall not try and pronounce because I don't know how to pronounce it, is effectively, he's still a scientist guy, but he's primarily trying to be a science fiction writer. And from the way he's portrayed in this particular, in his particular timeline or branch of the timeline, he's a failed one, basically. And so you've got your 3 principal kind of male characters who are, here for who've gone back to their branches. And all 3 of them, one's effectively a car salesman, but much less glamorous, selling jet skis, and doesn't appear to be terribly successful at it or making any significant amount of money at it, whose wife left him, making him a single father to 2 sons. And then after that, you've got Casey, convicted criminal in Alcatraz, so must have committed a very serious crime or crimes to end up there. And then you have, again, OB, who is still kind of in the whole, does the science stuff, but that's his kind of his day-to-day job to make a living, and his main interest is writing science fiction novels, which he has so far failed to be successful at. I mean, it doesn't look like he's, maybe he's self-published or something like that, but he doesn't seem to have had any success at it at all. When you then take into account that the only female character who has been kind of reset and doesn't remember the TVA and so on, who's in this, is Hunter B-15, played by I won't pronounce her name, Miss Mosaka, or Mosaku. I apologize again, I don't know what the pronunciation is. And she's some sort of doctor working in a hospital, maybe a pediatric doctor, because she's working with her patient, you see, and when you're looking at her in her branch of the timeline, she's treating a girl who broke her arm. Again, in isolation, okay, but this has really become a serious, not just a story trope like, the damsel in distress. This has become a trope almost exclusive, as far as I'm aware, to Disney. They just seem to be completely unwilling to give their male characters what might be considered by the audience to be an even a kind of a mid experience. Or, again, it's all Indiana Jones, sad and old, Han Solo, sad and old, Luke Skywalker, sad and old, Casey's a convicted criminal in a serious prison. Loki is still, again, compared to the comics, sad and mopey. Mobius is in a decidedly kind of unglamorous job as Mobius is a single father abandoned by his wife and the mother of his two sons, stuck in a pretty kind of, as it's portrayed, pedestrian to mediocre job with maybe a certain degree of success if he's able to keep a roof over himself and his kids' heads, but not much more. Obi, again, a failed novelist. And that is, in isolation, it's one thing, but it is now, as I said, it is so Disney specific a trope at this stage that it's A, boring, in my view, B, lazy, and there's clearly some sort of ideological motivation behind it, because there's no other reason to do it. There's no other reason. Just keep doing it so consistently with Hawkeye. Again, there are probably a number of characters I don't remember off the top of my head that fit this box. You can even say it about what is his name? Samuel L. Jackson's character in Secret Invasion, as well. Old and mopey, old and sad, one way or another. And that really is kind of, it's, at this point, I'm sorry, this isn't by accident. This is clearly on purpose. It's happened too many times, too consistently. And the clear kind of a juxtaposition between Hunter B-15 and what she's doing and what her life is like, and that of all the other kind of variants is, again, in isolation, but when you look at what Disney has done with so many of their other male characters going back now years and years and years, all the way back to The Force Awakens, I can't remember how long ago that was now, but that really, it really is kind of why do they, again, the only reason they would keep on doing this is because they're either completely out of creative ideas, they're extremely creatively lazy, or there are certain ideological underpinnings behind it all, which, again, considering how much success or lack thereof Disney has had this year, and how much of a train wreck Disney Plus has been over the last 2 years, is one would think that market conditions and the reality of the real world would cause them to change direction. But so far, if it has kicked, all of these kind of core creative decisions for these shows would have been made quite some time ago. And so, as I've said in one of my previous episode reviews, while it's still better written than anything we've gotten out of Disney Plus, in my view, in the last 2 years. Again, I haven't watched Moon Knight, and I'm not going to. It is fundamentally, it's an improvement over what's come before, but it does have the same kind of key, kind of core ideological underpinnings, which do kind of stick their heads above the parapet to annoy the viewer, particularly if you've been consuming the rest of Disney's content and are just aware of the general kind of buzz around it. And it is at best if you were personally quite attached to the Loki character because you're a fan of the comics, I think you would find all of this quite annoying. I found The Last Jedi irksome in the extreme, quite frankly. And I didn't like the Force Awakens either, because of what happened to Han Solo and how he was portrayed. So if you're an OG Loki fan, I would imagine if you are still watching this show, you may well be hate watching it. But it's, even with all of this, because of such the very poor state of the content, or poor quality of the content, principally driven by the writing, that we've gotten out of Disney Plus specifically in the last 2 years. This is still one of the better written things, of the best written show we've gotten out of them in 2 years. But it's still, it's still not good enough. It's better than what's come before, but it's still not good enough. It's not anywhere near, in my view, as good as Gen V, let alone what we can probably expect out of season 4 of The Boys and season 2 of House of the Dragon, to name 2. Or I don't know where I'd place it in comparison to season 3 of Star Trek Picard, because that show got genuinely boring for me in kind of episode 3 and 4. But, and again, I've got to take into account that I have a lot of nostalgia for those characters. But this is, it's the best out of Disney Plus in a while, but it's again nowhere near good enough. And it's kind of weird in the sense that the production quality, the set design is there. You can hardly, if ever, tell when they're not using the volume. They've kind of really improved their use of it. Credit where credit is due. The cast is, the cast would, if they had more to work with, better to work with, would be better than they are here. Or they're still doing, I think Tom Hiddleston is doing a very good job with what he's got to work with, and the same is true of the rest of the cast. And it's just so strange to see such high quality production values, yet still have writing that, again, if you were looking at a show again from HBO with the kind of production value that this show has gotten, or this show has, and a lot of the kind of, like, Ahsoka would have been the same deal, season 3 of The Mandalorian would be the same deal. With the production quality you've got, you would just frankly expect the show to be much better than it is, or Ahsoka to be much better than it is. It's like the production crew know what they're doing. They're getting better and better at using the volume, using it where they should use it, and not using it where they shouldn't. The cinematography is there. The direction, as far as I'm concerned, is there. Or at least, if it's not necessarily great, it's not detracting from the show. But again, with the script they've got to work with, the dialogue they've got to work with, they've put the money on screen, but they've not put it into the script at all. Well, again, not at all. It's still better written than anything we've seen out of Disney Plus in quite some time, but it's not as good as again, I suppose you could say the criticism of Star Trek Picard has like twice the number of episodes this does. So you could say that in Star Trek Picard's defense. And as I said, it does kind of drag for me for kind of episodes, I want to say 3 to 4. Is it 4 to 5 on Star Trek Picard? But outside of that, a bit of a real, again, Gen V is kind of the best new show for me this year so far. I thought there were some fundamentally flawed decisions that were made in The Last of Us season 1, although I haven't watched the final episode, so I should go back and do that. That's principally a lack of infected in many of the episodes, which means that they don't have the kind of background tension they should have. But this is the thing. It's just, broken record here. It's the best thing they've come up with writing wise in 2 years. But the fact that the production quality as a whole is so good, the cast is so strong, but the writing is still so, it's not, maybe it is bad. Again, maybe it's the case, just my exposure to Disney Plus for 2 years has just lowered my standards and my expectations. And this is actually, a genuinely badly written show, or maybe it's genuinely kind of mid at best. I mean, it's not good. It's not good. It's mid at best, but it is still better than the combination of the cast and the better writing that we've seen from Disney Plus. It's the best thing that Disney Plus has come up with in 2 years, but it's nowhere near. If this is to set the new standard for the next for next year for Disney Plus, they're not going to turn things around. I mean, I would imagine they're going to, how many subscribers have they got? What's their retention rate at? If you're subscribed to Disney Plus for the exclusive live action content, maybe if every show that had been out in the last 2 years had been to this standard of writing, you might just be putting up with it. But I've the sneaking suspicion that we're going back to more kind of poor quality content, or maybe same good or better production values, but worse writing. With the next MCU or Star Wars show that's coming down the pipeline, I think we've got the Agatha Coven of Chaos show, and then they've made a spin-off show from Hawkeye around Echo, the Echo character from Hawkeye. So those are both coming down the pipeline. I don't know if they've been delayed or anything, but if they were started to make creative decisions, serious changes a couple of months ago, we know the Daredevil reboot is directors and writers were all fired, and new people were brought in to probably redo the entire first season. I think they'd done 8 episodes, and that wasn't good enough, or was so bad they got rid of it all, because that would have been a disaster. Because since this is effectively, it's not a continuation of the Netflix show, because they don't want to pay the people responsible for that money, but they have taken, they've hired some of the core actors from that show to reprise their roles. And if the show is badly made, badly written as even as this has been made, let alone as Loki has been written badly, or again as mid as written again bad, it's so difficult to get my head around it, considering just how poor the Disney Plus stuff has been. But a Daredevil show written to an inferior standard to Loki, because it already has, a show that you can go back and look at on Netflix, would be a disaster for them. But if they are kind of making a serious, changing in the direction in terms of how and how they put their shows together, how they write them, how they put a production team together and so on, great. But it could be a year or more before we feel the consequences of that. And so I think it's going to be more of a slow, steady. Hopefully there'll be some more stuff next year that'll be at least, not worse than this. But for all we know, everything that's coming next year could be worse than this from a writing standpoint. Anyway, that's my review / rant. You have my apologies, but it is what it is. Anyway, this is DafubFilm&TV signing off. Toodaloo.